The door clicked shut with a finality that sent a chill down my spine. I had laughed at my friends when they said Professor Carter could scare the life out of anyone. But now, standing alone in that echoing lecture hall with him moving toward me, I wasn't laughing. My pulse was pounding so loud it drowned out reason. What was worse? His reputation for merciless cross-examinations, or the truth I had buried deep inside me? The truth that every glance, every clipped word of his had ignited something I couldn't stop. I had been living with that secret for months. I was in love with my professor. Professor Jonathan Carter wasn't just a teacher. He was a force of nature. He walked into every room like he owned the air, and maybe he did. His lectures on constitutional law could have been dry as dust, yet under his commanding tone and sharp mind, they became alive, electric. He tore apart arguments with surgical precision, and sometimes, when his steel-blue eyes swept across the classroom, I felt exposed, as if he knew exactly what I was hiding. But that afternoon was different. The last of the students had shuffled out, leaving behind the scrape of chairs and a faint smell of coffee. I had been slow to pack my bag, still scribbling notes, when the heavy thud of the door locking jolted me. I looked up, startled, to see him. Carter wasn't at the podium. He wasn't gathering his papers. He was walking toward me. "Mr. Hayes," he said, his voice low, deliberate. My last name on his tongue sounded like both a warning and an invitation. "Yes, sir." My voice cracked, betraying me. He stopped a few feet away, close enough that I could see the faint shadow of stubble along his jaw, the sharp lines of exhaustion mixed with control. His gaze lingered on me, not on my notes, not on the open textbook. On me. "You've been distracted lately." The accusation, or was it observation, hung in the air. Distracted? That was one word for it. Try hopelessly in love. Try memorizing the way his tie knot changed every Monday. Try fantasizing about what those hands, the same ones that scrawled furious red comments across our essays, might feel like if they weren't holding a pen. I swallowed hard, fighting the rush of heat rising to my face. I've just been tired." His brow arched. "Tired," he repeated as though testing the word. His tone made it sound like a lie, and maybe it was. He stepped closer, and the distance between us shrank to almost nothing. My throat tightened. The sunlight cut across the room, catching on the edges of his glasses, making it impossible to read his eyes. I thought, for one terrifying second, that he might hear it, the unspoken confession hammering in my chest. I had promised myself I would never let it slip. Not here, not in this world where professors and students lived in strict boundaries, where every rule screamed against what I wanted. But with him so close, his presence overwhelming, the silence pressing in, I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff. And maybe, deep down, I wanted to jump. That moment was the spark, but the truth is, my story with Carter had begun long before. It began on the first day of class, when I had walked into his lecture half awake, nursing the cheap coffee that never quite did its job. He had been standing at the front like a storm bottled up in a man, controlled, fierce, sharp. He didn't need to raise his voice to command silence. He owned it. He had asked a question about judicial review, something I barely remembered from undergrad. No one raised their hand. My heart had thudded in my chest, not out of confidence but fear, and yet somehow my hand went up. Words tumbled out, shaky but honest. He had looked at me then, really looked, not just the way professors look at students, but in a way that felt like he was peeling back layers, seeing more than I wanted him to. "Not bad," he had said and moved on. 2 words, and yet they had branded themselves into me. Since then, I had chased those rare moments when his approval brushed over me. They were crumbs, but I collected them like treasures. A nod when I framed an argument well, a fleeting smile when I caught a nuance in a case he hadn't expected. I knew it was dangerous. I knew he was untouchable. But love isn't logical, and mine for Carter grew in silence, fed by every glance, every word, every impossible inch of distance between us. Now, standing in that empty lecture hall, with him just a breath away, I felt the weight of all that longing pressing against the fragile walls I had built to contain it. He said my name again, softer this time. Ethan. Not Hayes. Not Mr. Hayes. Ethan. My heart stopped. And in that one word, spoken with quiet gravity, I heard everything I had tried not to hope for. Ethan. Just my name. A single word. But it carried a weight I wasn't prepared for, as if he had just crossed a boundary I thought would always protect me. For months, Carter had been Professor, Sir, Mr. Carter, never Ethan's professor, never Jonathan, never anything human in a way that might blur the lines. And now, here he was, cutting through the formality like a blade. My grip tightened on the edge of my notebook. Yes, I whispered, though I didn't even know what I was agreeing to. He didn't speak right away. Instead, his gaze lingered, searching, questioning, holding me in a silence that grew louder by the second. My lungs burned. My body was a mess of contradictions. Fight, flight, or something worse. Finally, he said, "You're too clever to be distracted by something trivial. So tell me, what is it that has your attention?" It was like he was handing me the noose, daring me to slip it over my own neck. I forced a weak smile. "It's nothing important, just life. Things outside class." He tilted his head slightly, the faintest sign of disbelief. "You expect me to accept that answer?" The corner of his mouth curved. Not quite a smile, not quite a smirk. It was devastating in its subtlety. My heart stumbled. "Professor, Jonathan." His interruption was quiet but commanding. My pulse jumped. "What? If you're going to lie to me," he said, voice deepening, "at least have the decency to use my name, Jonathan." The name I had whispered to myself late at night, unspoken on my tongue in daylight. The name I had tried not to write in the margins of my notes like a foolish teenager. Felt dangerous to even think it, but I wanted to. God, I wanted to. "Jonathan," I breathed, testing the sound. Something flickered in his eyes. Triumph, maybe, or relief. Couldn't tell. And then he stepped even closer, the faint brush of his sleeve grazing mine. It was such a small contact, but it might as well have been fire. "I know what distraction looks like, Ethan. I see it in courtrooms, in juries, in witnesses. And I see it in you." The floor seemed to tilt. He knew. He had to know. But instead of retreating, I held his gaze. I had been running from this truth for so long that maybe I was too exhausted to run anymore. "Maybe you're right," I said softly. "Maybe I am distracted." He studied me for what felt like forever. The clock on the wall ticked, each second an explosion in the quiet. Then, finally, he let out a breath I hadn't realized he was holding. "You're playing a dangerous game." "I know." Silence stretched again, thick with everything unsaid. And then, with a suddenness that nearly knocked me over, he stepped back. The distance between us returned, but the damage was already done. The line we had both pretended was unbreakable had just cracked. "Go home, Ethan," he said, his voice clipped now, back to the professor I recognized. "Get some rest." He turned, gathering his notes as though nothing had happened, as though he hadn't just ripped the ground out from under me. I stood there, shaking until I finally forced my legs to move. I left the lecture hall, but the echo of my name on his lips followed me all the way back to my apartment. The night was merciless. I tossed in bed, staring at the ceiling, the glow of the city bleeding through my blinds. I tried to think of anything else. Homework, bills, even the growing pressure of my final year. But it was useless. Every thought circled back to him. Jonathan. The way his voice had wrapped around my name. The way he had dared me to step closer to the truth. I wanted him, and worse, I suspected he wanted me too. It was a thought I had no right to entertain. Not in this world. Not with the stakes so high. But once the possibility had been spoken into the air, it wouldn't die. The following week was torture. I walked into class Monday morning expecting everything to feel the same, but nothing did. Every glance, every question, every stride he took across the room seemed sharper, more loaded. I couldn't look at him without remembering the locked door, the sound of his voice when he wasn't Professor Carter, but simply Jonathan. And yet, he was ruthless as ever. He grilled us on precedent, cut through half-formed arguments like paper. When he called on me, he gave me no mercy, pushing me harder than anyone else. But beneath it, I felt something. When our eyes locked across the room, there was a fraction of a second too long, a silence too deep, a connection no one else seemed to notice, but I couldn't escape. Later that week, fate, or maybe something crueler, threw us together again. I had been at the library, drowning in case law, when a shadow fell across my table. I looked up and there he was. "Still here?" he asked. My mouth went dry. "Yeah, just trying to catch up." His gaze flicked to the pile of books. "Ambitious," I shrugged. "Or desperate?" The corner of his mouth twitched, but he didn't smile. Instead, he set his own stack of books down across from me. "You don't mind if I sit?" It wasn't a question. He sat before I could answer. I stared at him for a long moment, struggling to process the surreal image of Jonathan Carter sitting across from me in the dim glow of the library. We didn't talk much. He read. I tried to, but the silence between us felt charged, electric, unbearable. At one point, our hands brushed when we both reached for the same highlighter. My breath caught, and for a second neither of us moved. His eyes met mine, steady, unflinching. And then he pulled back, the highlighter left between us like a line neither of us dared to cross. By the time I left the library that night, my chest ached with the weight of it. We were orbiting each other, pulled in by something unstoppable, yet resisting with every ounce of strength. I didn't know how long we could keep it up. But I knew one thing for certain. This wasn't just a distraction anymore. It was the beginning of something dangerous, something inevitable, something that could destroy us both. The days blurred into one another, but the memory of that night in the library stayed carved into me. It was such a small thing, a brush of hands, a silence held a second too long, but it had left me raw, unable to breathe the same way I used to. Jonathan Carter was supposed to be untouchable, immovable, an iron wall of intellect and discipline. Yet, in that quiet library, I had seen the crack. Not wide, not obvious, but enough. Enough to make me believe that I wasn't alone in this. And that belief was more dangerous than anything. The next class was brutal. Carter stood at the front of the room, chalk in hand, scribbling a timeline of constitutional amendments with the precision of a surgeon. His back was straight, his voice unyielding, each point punctuated like a gavel striking wood. "Hayes," he snapped suddenly. My heart stuttered. "Yes, Professor?" His eyes caught mine, and for an instant I swore the world fell away. Then his voice sharpened. "Explain the significance of Marbury versus Madison. And if you give me the watered-down textbook answer, I will stop you mid-sentence." The class chuckled nervously. My throat went dry. I began, stumbling at first, but then finding my rhythm, weaving the threads of judicial review, separation of powers, and the audacity of the Supreme Court to carve its authority into stone. I didn't look at my notes. I didn't look at my classmates. I looked only at him. And when I finished, breathless, he said nothing, just a slight nod. It was the closest thing to praise he ever gave in public. But it was enough. Still, the tension lingered. The others didn't see it, but I felt it. Every time his eyes swept the room, they lingered a fraction too long on me. Every time his hand slammed against the board for emphasis, I jumped, wondering if his fury was meant to cover something else. That Friday, I made the mistake of going out with friends. We ended up at a bar just off campus, the kind of place where law students drowned in cheap whiskey and bitter laughter. My friends were loud, teasing, relentless. They talked about internships, about exams, about who was secretly sleeping with whom. Hayes, one of them slurred, nudging me with a grin. "You've been spaced out all semester. What's her name?" I forced a laugh. "What makes you think it's a girl?" The table roared with laughter. "Oh damn," another chimed in. "So that's why he blushes all the time." My ears burned. "I didn't say that." "Fine, fine," they teased. "But whoever it is, tell us. Someone's got you twisted." I took a long sip of my drink, hiding behind the burn of alcohol. If only they knew. If only I had the courage to say it out loud. It's him. The one man I can't have. The one man who has already undone me. But instead, I smiled and changed the subject, all the while feeling the secret rot inside me. The following week brought the breaking point. I was in Carter's office, a cramped room lined with bookshelves and papers stacked in precarious towers. I had come to ask about a paper deadline, but the second I stepped inside, I knew it was a mistake. The door closed behind me, muffling the noise of the hallway. The air was heavy with the scent of old books and his cologne. Clean, sharp, distracting. He looked up from his desk, glasses perched low on his nose. "Ethan." Just my name again. Soft, dangerous. I shifted uneasily. I just wanted to ask about the assignment." He set his pen down. "The assignment can wait." I froze. He leaned back, studying me with that same unflinching gaze that had stripped me bare in the lecture hall. "Do you think I don't notice?" My chest tightened. "Notice what?" "You," he said simply. The word shattered me. My mouth opened, but no sound came. My heart was a drumbeat gone mad, threatening to split me open. He stood, moving around the desk until he was standing in front of me, close enough that I could see the faint creases at the corners of his eyes, the controlled tension in his jaw. "I should stop this," he murmured. "I should tell you to leave. I should remind you of the rules." "Then do it," I whispered, my voice trembling. His eyes burned into mine. "You don't want me to." The truth hung there, undeniable. And before I could think, before reason could scream at me, I said the words I had been burying for months. "I can't stop thinking about you." The silence after was suffocating. My confession felt like a grenade, and I was waiting for the explosion. But instead of anger, instead of rejection, I saw something else flicker across his face. Something raw, something real. He closed his eyes, exhaling sharply, as if the weight of the world had just landed on his shoulders. When he opened them again, his voice was low, strained. "Do you have any idea what you've just done?" I swallowed hard. "Yes." He stepped closer, so close I could feel the heat of him, the space between us collapsing. His hand twitched at his side, as if he wanted to reach out but couldn't. "You're playing with fire," he said. "Then burn me," I whispered. The words slipped out before I could stop them. Reckless, desperate, true. For a moment, neither of us moved. The tension was unbearable, electric, alive. Then, with visible effort, he stepped back, putting distance between us again. His voice was hoarse when he spoke. "Get out, Ethan. Now." It felt like a door slamming shut inside me, but I obeyed. I walked out, my chest aching, my confession still echoing in the air behind me. That night I couldn't sleep. My body felt hollow, my mind a storm. I had finally said it. The secret was no longer secret. And his reaction, God, I didn't know what it meant. But I knew this. Something had shifted. And nothing would ever be the same again. The week after my confession was the longest of my life. Jonathan hadn't spoken to me once. Not a glance, not a word, not even the sharp call of Hayes in class. He skipped over me as if I didn't exist, like my seat was empty, like I had become invisible overnight. And yet, I felt his absence everywhere. Every question he asked, I wanted to answer. Every theory he dismantled, I wanted to meet his gaze. But he refused me that. He built a wall so tall between us that I almost convinced myself the moment in his office had been a fever dream. Almost. Because in those seconds when the lecture hall quieted, when his eyes scanned the room, I swore I felt it. That split-second hesitation before he forced himself to look away. That was enough to keep the fire alive. Enough to drive me insane. One night, frustration drove me outside. I walked aimlessly across campus, the chill in the air biting through my jacket. I found myself near the law school building, its windows glowing faintly in the dark. And there he was. Jonathan Carter, framed in the window of his office, bent over a pile of papers. His posture was stiff, his jaw clenched even from a distance. He looked less like the invincible professor and more like a man unraveling. I stood there, rooted to the ground, watching him, wanting him. When the light in his office flicked off, I panicked and ducked behind the shadow of a tree, ashamed of my voyeurism. I waited, holding my breath, until he emerged, locking the door behind him. For a moment, he paused on the steps, his eyes lifting toward the quad, toward me. Did he see me? Did he sense me? Couldn't tell. He shoved his hands in his coat pockets and walked away, his figure swallowed by the night. I didn't sleep at all after that. The breaking point came a week later. I was in the student lounge, half listening to two classmates gossip while I skimmed case notes. "Did you hear?" one whispered. "Carter got into it with Dean Roberts again. Something about the ethics committee." The other snorted. "He's always on the edge of trouble. Man doesn't know how to play politics." My stomach tightened. Ethics. The word stung like a blade. "Rumor is," the first continued, lowering her voice, "he's been involved. With someone. And Roberts isn't letting it slide." My chest froze. "Who?" "No one knows. But if the committee gets wind of it," she drew her finger across her throat. I couldn't move. My body was ice, my mind fire. I shoved my notes into my bag and left, my pulse roaring in my ears. It wasn't me. Couldn't be me. No one knew. No one could know. But the possibility was there. The walls were closing in. That afternoon, I found him alone in the hallway, locking his classroom. "Jonathan," I blurted, before I could stop myself. His head snapped up, eyes sharp, but his face softened when he saw me. Just a flicker, but I caught it. "Not here," he said quickly. "Not now. Please. Just 5 minutes." His jaw clenched. For a long moment he said nothing. Then he opened the door again, motioning me inside. The room was empty, echoing with silence. He shut the door but didn't lock it this time. What is it? His voice was strained, tired. There are rumors, I said. About you. About someone. Something flickered in his eyes. Fear, anger, both. You shouldn't be listening to gossip. I can't help it, I snapped. If this gets out, if they find out. They won't, he said firmly, though I wasn't sure if he believed it. I took a step closer. Why are you doing this? Pretending like it doesn't exist? Pretending like I don't exist. His face hardened. Because it's the only way to protect you. Protect us. The words hit me like a punch. Protect us, I repeated. So you admit it. You feel it too. He turned away, rubbing his temples. Damn it, Ethan. I moved before I could stop myself, closing the distance, my hand brushing his sleeve. He froze but didn't pull away. This isn't just me, I whispered. You can't deny it. He turned then, his eyes burning. You think I don't want you? You think I don't fight this every single day? His voice cracked, raw, nothing like the controlled man who ruled the classroom. But wanting isn't enough. It can't be. I swallowed hard. Then why does it feel like it is? For a heartbeat, the world stopped. His hand twitched at his side, then lifted, hesitant, trembling, before retreating again. The air between us vibrated with everything unsaid. Then he stepped back, the mask sliding over his face again. This ends here, he said coldly, before it destroys us both. And just like that, he walked out, leaving me in the empty room, my heart breaking into pieces too sharp to hold. But the truth was out now, couldn't go back. And neither could he. The storm broke faster than either of us could prepare for. The rumors didn't stay whispers. By the end of the week, they spread across campus like wildfire. Through dorms, group chats, faculty lounges. Some said Carter had been caught with someone. Others swore they'd seen us together. By Monday, I couldn't walk across the quad without hearing my name spat in hushed voices. And then came the summons. Carter had been called before the ethics committee. I didn't hear it from him. I heard it from a classmate, the pity in her eyes almost unbearable. He's in trouble, she whispered. They're saying it could end his career. The ground tilted beneath me. My chest went hollow. I skipped class that day, my notebook abandoned on my desk, my hands trembling as I walked circles around my apartment. Every fiber of me screamed to run to him, to find him, to tell the truth. But the truth was the very thing that could ruin him. That night, I sat on the floor of my room, staring at my phone, his number glowing on the screen. My thumb hovered over call for what felt like hours. In the end, I didn't press it. Because I was a coward. The hearing was scheduled for Friday. By then, the whole campus buzzed with it. Students speculated in the library. Professors whispered in corridors. Everyone was waiting to see the mighty Jonathan Carter fall. I couldn't stay away. That morning, I walked into the courthouse building where the committee met, my legs heavy, my chest tight. The hallway outside the chamber was lined with faculty and students, murmuring, shifting, pretending they weren't waiting for blood. And then I saw him. Jonathan stood at the far end of the hall, a dark suit wrapped around him like armor. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes, God, his eyes. When they found me, the mask cracked, just for a second. I moved toward him before I could think. People stared, but I didn't care. Don't, he murmured when I reached him. You shouldn't be here. I have to be. My voice shook. They'll tear you apart. His jaw tightened. Then let them. Better me than you. The words cut deep. He was willing to burn alone. He had always been willing. But I wasn't. Not anymore. I leaned closer, lowering my voice. You don't get to decide that. You're not the only one in this. His eyes closed for a brief second, as if the weight of it all was crushing him. Then he touched my arm, just a ghost of contact, quickly withdrawn. Ethan, please. The committee door opened. They called his name. And Jonathan Carter, the man I loved, walked inside to face judgment. The minutes that followed were agony. I sat outside, the muffled voices seeping through the thick wood doors. I couldn't hear the words, but I imagined them. Conflict of interest, breach of trust, professionalism, ethics. And then my own name. My heart clenched at the sound, faint but unmistakable. They were asking about me. I stood. I couldn't sit still. My body moved before my mind caught up. My hand was on the door, pushing it open, stepping into the chamber where professors and deans sat in a semicircle, their faces grim, their pens scratching. And there he was, standing alone in the center, shoulders squared like a soldier facing a firing squad. The room stilled when I entered. Ethan Hayes, one of the committee members said, eyes narrowing. This is a closed hearing. I don't care, I said, my voice trembling but loud enough to carry. If you're talking about me, then I deserve to be here. Jonathan's eyes widened, panic flashing across his face. Ethan, no. But it was too late. I stepped forward, my legs shaking but steady enough to carry me to his side. You want the truth? Here it is. Yes. Care about him. More than I can explain. And if you want to destroy him for that, then you'll have to destroy me too. Gasps rippled through the room. The committee members exchanged glances, some horrified, some cold, some unreadable. Jonathan turned to me, his face a storm of anger and heartbreak. Why would you do this? He whispered. Because I love you, I said simply. The words hung in the air like a blade. For a long moment no one spoke. Then the dean cleared his throat. This is highly inappropriate. Both of you will face consequences for this. Consequences. My voice cracked, but I pressed on. For what? For being human. For feeling something we're told we shouldn't? You call it unprofessional. I call it surviving in a world that's terrified of love that doesn't fit the mold. A hush fell. My chest heaved, tears threatening, but I didn't back down. And then Jonathan did something that shattered me. He reached for my hand. In front of everyone, he laced his fingers through mine, his grip firm, defiant. His eyes, locked on the committee, burned with a fire I had never seen before. You're right, he said, his voice steady. I love him too, and if that costs me this job, so be it. The room erupted. Voices clashed. Outrage, disbelief, whispers of scandal. But I didn't hear them. All I heard was him. All I felt was his hand in mine. The fallout was brutal. Carter resigned before the committee could formally remove him. Whispers turned into headlines in the student paper. Some called him disgraceful. Some called me naive. A few quietly called us brave. But through it all, we had each other. He found another position, lecturing part-time at a community college while taking on more cases in court. I graduated that spring, not with the clean reputation I had imagined, but with a certainty I wouldn't trade for anything. On the night of my graduation, he stood at the edge of the crowd, watching as I threw my cap into the air. When our eyes met, he smiled. Not the guarded half-smile of a professor, but the full, unrestrained smile of a man finally free. Later, on the courthouse steps where everything had almost ended, I found him waiting. The city glowed behind us, warm and alive. You're sure about this? He asked, his hand brushing mine. More than anything, I said. And this time, when our fingers intertwined, there was no fear, no shame, Just the quiet strength of two people who had chosen each other despite the world. He kissed me then, soft, certain, inevitable. The world didn't stop. People still stared, whispers still lingered. But none of it mattered. Because for the first time I wasn't hiding. And neither was he. The love I thought would ruin us had, in the end, saved us. And though the road ahead was uncertain, one thing was clear. We had faced the fire, and we were walking out of it hand in hand. Together. Thank you for listening. If you find it interesting, please like and subscribe to follow the next stories.